Greetings YouTube, maineprimitive here. I thought I'd put together a proper introduction video now that I have some time, so that I can tell you about who I am, what my goals are, how I arrived at them, and how I was able to follow them. I know it'll be a little bit boring, but all of my future videos and my philosophies are built on this foundation. I hope you enjoy. In my freshman year of high school, as a first day project in English class, we were to interview one another in groups. One of the questions that we were to ask one another was what we wanted to do when we grew up, what our chosen occupation was. The best answer I could offer at the time was to become a vagabond. This was the dawn of the idea that would eventually transform into my life's work. As I considered the idea of becoming a vagabond and roaming from city to city with only what I would need to sustain me, and as I began to consider if such a plan would be tenable, several modifications took place. I realized that I would not be happy if I needed to rely on begging to get the things I needed, so a shift was made towards obtaining my sustenance from the environment as I traveled. I began to study hunting and bushcraft, plant identification, and the like. This led to a desire to roam living off the land in secluded areas where I would not be bothered or questioned. I have always enjoyed being in the outdoors, and so this had had a strong immediate appeal for me. When I got married, my wife placed additional stipulations on my plans. She insisted that I own any land that I would be living on, and that everything would be done in accordance with the law. This presented many difficulties, and I nearly put my plans by the wayside due to the amount of bureaucracy and red tape that would make living in such a way nearly impossible. But I never lost sight of my goals, and I was finally able to find a path through the tangle of red tape which would make it possible to follow my dreams. As my plans went through their various stages and transitions, what I wanted from life influenced my studies and knowledge. My studies and what I learned from them influenced my personal philosophy, which, being better and better honed and focused, influenced my desires in a continuous cycle which kept turning like a wheel until everything crystallized and my vision was clear. Much of what has brought me to this point is removing the things that don't matter and reverse engineering the fictions of modern life to get to the root of the fictions we live in and find the fertile soil of truth underneath. I have not always been able to find the answers, but as I remove the fiction, I have a closer understanding of where to continue my search. Discussing it with a friend recently, I likened it unto having 3 jigsaw puzzles all mixed up together and wanting to complete one of them. Once 60% of the puzzle is put together, even though there are still pieces missing, there is enough context to be able to find and complete the missing sections. Likewise, if the undesired puzzles are also being assembled, it is easier to discern what does and doesn't fit. This is much of the way I have come to look at life, both in the truths I seek and the fictions I wish to eliminate. If one were to analyze my socio-political position, I'm sure that the category I would best fit into is that of the anarcho-primitive. In short, this is a worldview that questions all aspects of civilization itself, from the dawn of the agricultural revolution to the highly developed technological systems we have today. I seek to leave all of that behind and to rediscover life as we humans are truly meant to experience it, without domestication, without the subjugation of plants through agriculture, without the technologies that require complete elaborate systems to sustain them. To engage in life directly, as I am, with only my skills and ingenuity to rely upon. To share in life with all other beings as equals, each of us living in our own terms, each of us free, in a give and take that restores the balance that has been upset by civilization, domestication, and the concept of ownership. As I have been pursuing essentially the same goals since my freshman year of high school, and I am now currently 31 years old, I have had much time to prepare myself, mentally, physically, and financially, to do the things that I wish to do. I have spent a lot of time in research, reading field guides and survival guides, and always looking first to indigenous peoples for the wisdom they have to pass on. For the past several years I have restricted myself that I might only read nonfiction, so that I might be best prepared for the life I face. I have spent as much time as I could find in the woods, on extended camping trips, and prepping my skills, although this has not been easy in the suburbs of a major city, especially while holding down a full-time job. So unfortunately, the dirt time I need to put in, I feel, is somewhat lacking. As many in today's world may sympathize, the financial preparations I needed to put into place were the most difficult. I was lucky enough to be able to purchase a house in a developing area at a very good price, so that I had plenty of equity built into the purchase. I also purchased a timeshare resort in Orlando, Florida, which I was able to sell for a fairly good profit, even while I used it for vacations in between. The equity from my home I was able to use to purchase a 51-acre property in the backwoods of Maine, as well as a cozy little house for my wife in a nearby town. The tricky part was making sure that at all times my assets outweighed my debts, so that when I chose to liquidate, I would leave scot-free. It also bears mentioning here that my wife has chosen to remain civilized, and will remain to hold down a job and live in a house in town. This will provide me with a useful safety net should all things fail. My long-term goals are fairly simple ones, aside from just living and experiencing life. My long-term goals are to reintegrate with nature in a meaningful way, and to gain certain knowledge of how humans are designed to interact in the ecosystem, and the purpose of humans in the ecosystem, for all things have evolved to function in a certain way, and we all have something to give back to those places that we live. So I wish to rediscover these lost pieces of knowledge, and to preserve this knowledge and to pass it on in the hopes that others may follow. In the short term, my goals for the first year of living in the wild are to construct a long-term shelter that will sustain me through winters, to observe and detect patterns in my environment and their effects, and to test and develop my skills and techniques, so that I may be more certain of my personal survival. By my second year, my goal is to be able to engage actively in the environment as a hunter-gatherer. By the end of my second year, my goal is to lay in enough wild supplies to last me through the winter. Although it is my goal to live exclusively by the fruits of my own labors, I am forced to acknowledge that not since the very first organism came into being has anyone ever been without the resources developed by the preceding generation and their culture. For this reason, and the constraints of having only a single lifetime, I will start out with the tools that my culture has provided me. So when I am using a steel saw or axe or even a pulley, it is in a way natural to do so. And I will be replacing these tools as I am able and as they wear out with more primitive tools of my own creation and design, with a reliance on those who have gone before me and passed on the knowledge of their creation. I will be living completely off the grid, with only the most minor exceptions. I will have a smartphone for communication and for research purposes and in the case of emergencies, which I will charge with a solar battery exclusively for this purpose. I also acknowledge the irony of using this device to aid me in my goals of primitive living and sharing my experience with all of you. However, I look upon it firstly as a tool, and like any tool, it is the use to which it is put that determines whether it is good or bad. Secondly, I look upon it as a way to use the weapons of my enemies for my own advantage. And finally, as it is my goal to preserve and pass on knowledge, I must make that knowledge available to the greatest number of people as I can. So until I am able to publish a manuscript of my experience, and in case I should meet with my demise before I am able, this is my best opportunity to do just that.